Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome you to the Crichton Sub Committee Meeting of the 12th of November 2015. Could I ask if we have any apologies in the Sederunt, please, Claire?
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies from Councillors Davidson, Groom and Maitland, and we're missing Councillors Scobie and Wood, who I'll presume are apologies. No comment, Councillor.
Can I remind members that this meeting is being recorded and subsequently available to the public for listening? Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, can we move to the only item on the agenda today, which is the variation to the Crichton lease? Could I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair, but I think Ewan is going to give us a brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think just following feedback from members at the last meeting, what we've taken an opportunity to do is expand the report with more context on the need for the variations to the lease, the reasons for that, and also confirmed in the report that we have had another check through property services and legal services in terms of the variations, and ensuring that the recommendations are clear that any changes in terms of land and assets in relation to the Crichton Trust require the approval of this subcommittee through the business planning process. So that's the main changes we've made to beef up the report.
Okay, can I open it up to members? Do you want to go through each of the proposed variations one at a time, just to get an explanation, or are you quite happy to? Ronnie?
Can I just in the last part you said in the air, and I see that in there, you know, it's explaining about the buildings, the council currently own, and how that would be subject to council written approval. And it then goes on to say, you know, about development of new buildings, for example. Is that new buildings, or does that include, you know, if the trust, for example, took on buildings which we don't own? Would that mean that they would have to come back to us? How would that stand? Or, you know, how does the Crichton Trust stand with that? Because every building that's on there just now, we own. But if another building that came in to the trust that we didn't own, and it came into the trust, how would that work along with the, you know, this paragraph and the governance on that?
Are you thinking in terms of buildings that might not be on the Crichton estate, or anything that was built on the estate? Both?
No,
Both.
Buildings that are either on the Crichton estate or not on the Crichton estate, but buildings that we don't own, which might be transferred to the trust, and that trust is for council buildings, if you want. It's for a council estate. It's not.
What I would say is that this report is only seeking a variation to the current arrangements. Any development on the site of the Crichton itself needs to come back through this committee for approval via the Crichton Trust and its business plan. Any additional assets or land that the Crichton Trust may be involved in the future would also have to come back here for approval, and as part of that process, we would then consider whether that required additional, the lease to, or any new leases to come on board, or any additional governance arrangements around assets. So it's very clear that the trust cannot take on other assets without this having been part of the business planning process and approved by this committee.
Certainly the lease at the moment effectively has a boundary and a list of all the properties that we own, and if there was a change to that, we would obviously have to come back here to get agreement that that would be effectively either included on the council's ownership, if you like, because we obviously ultimately own the buildings. Is that correct? And that line would have to be amended to include that. Is that?
Yes, because the council ultimately own the Crichton Trust.
Okay, does that cover the point? Ivor?
Chair, I take it we're not now looking at current legislation and updating the minor variations, because that's been removed from the report. The other thing is, we were told by Rob the other day that the current lease is unwieldy, couldn't be implemented, involved the original, was it 2004 or prior to that, business case, and that has all been taken out. I would say that was a major change rather than just 3 noted here minor variations. I still don't have that explanation as to exactly what has been taken out and what effects that will have on it. You know, if we're taking the whole of the original lease out and putting a new one in place, surely that must be a big step rather than just 3 wee points here plus minor variations. And I just have concern what has actually come out.
So apart, we've got the 3 variations here, and it says minor. So what exactly are the changes to the lease?
The changes to the lease are outlined in the table. The reference to the strategic development framework that exists, that strategic development framework will still exist, and will end up being superseded by the new development framework that's been agreed and moving forward. That will go through EEI committee in January for final approval, if you like. But that's about referencing that any activity through the lease must be in line with that. Therefore, it's a reference as opposed to a major. It's not an element of the lease. It's a reference to it, and particularly in the side letter, where it's very, very clear that any development or any proposals from the trust coming forward must adhere to what the development framework, either as is at the moment or the one that will supersede it, which is the framework that development framework that committee agreed at the last meeting. So it's ensuring that it's not in the lease, but it's ensuring that the trust are fully obliged to comply with any of the planning documents that link to the trust and to the estate.
Of the, it also obviously talks about the governance arrangements. Is that simply the fact that obviously since the lease will have been written, the arrangements have changed quite significantly. We've got the Crichton Committee and all that, so it's basically updated to bring it in line with the new arrangements. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think we didn't have any problem with the first variation. That was to extend the lease date. I think we agreed that anyway. I'm extending it by 41 years. Not a problem with that. I think the second one is a wee bit more clear what they're trying to do. The only question I've had following on from point raised by Ronnie, that they have to come back to us if they want to acquire anything out with the current agreement. But does that also apply to the Crichton Development Company? Because bearing in mind the Crichton Trust is a charitable institution, and therefore it's got to come back to us. Crichton Development Company is a trading arm of the Crichton Trust, and therefore it's not subject to this agreement, I don't think. So say, for instance, the Crichton Development Company wanted to take on Crichton Hall, could they do that without any reference back?
No, it couldn't, because that would be a decision that would have to go through the Crichton Trust board itself, because the Crichton Trust in fact owns the development company. Therefore, any decision that was for that by the development company would have to come from the trust. The trust couldn't take that decision without coming to this committee first.
The reason I ask, I'm quite well aware that trusts of themselves can change their constitution, but if the trust, for instance, decided they were going to give certain rights to the Crichton Development Company without reference back, could that happen?
Not out with the terms of either the lease or the business plan that's approved by committee. So I know the point you're making, actually, and I think that the reassurance I would give is that previously there has never been a subcommittee in place to take that scrutiny from members. And by moving to a position where the council is the sole owner of the trust, that provides absolute control through this subcommittee and ultimately through full council.
Ultimately, the check would be the fact that they wouldn't be able to carry out something that isn't in the business plan. Is that what you're saying the check is? And therefore, this business plan any changes to the business plan must come before this committee.
I think the reason being is if we look at the sort of trustees nowadays, most of them are from out with the region. And I know myself, when I served in it for about 8 years, because you were here and because you were hearing things in the grapevine, we were quite able to, very, very able to scrutinise what was going on up there. The trouble is now, if you've got a whole host of trustees who are mainly based in the Central Belt, they're only popping down here for a meeting once every quarter. So you're probably going to have the same level of scrutiny of the management, if you like, that you were getting in the past. Because we don't have any councillors on the board anymore, do we?
No, we don't. The assurance I would give you is that there's still 5 trustees based in the region from Dumfries and Galloway out of 12. But the point was well made at the last meeting about in recruitment of future trustees focusing on the region. The reason that the appointment was to ensure that the right skills base was on the trust, for example. But I think what I feel is that because of the governance changes with the council creating clear blue water between the role of a trustee and a member on this committee, that gives us actually a much stronger oversight and scrutiny of what's happening in the Crichton. Whereas before, I think there was a shade of grey between some members being on the trust and there wasn't actually a report going to committee at all.
Well, I think to be fair, that actually when you sit on a trust, you're there as a trustee, you're not there effectively as a councillor, albeit you're appointed by a councillor, and I think that's the difference. What you've actually now got is a situation where we've got a Crichton committee, and previously, frankly, you know, how many people knew the decisions of the trust, apart from the councillors that were on it, and they were there making decisions as trustees rather than as councillors. So I think the fact we've got this scrutiny role, it's important to play. But I think it was a point I made at the last meeting, is that, you know, the ambitions for the Crichton are obviously developing all the time, and the scale is developing all the time, and we need to make sure that the role we're playing as a committee is fit for purpose, that we're actually properly scrutinising those changes, you know, because things are rapidly moving, and obviously we need to have a look at that. And I think we'll ask for a paper for a future meeting to look at how we actually make sure we're working closely with the trust, take forward our joint aims. Ronnie?
It's, just for my own clarification on this, you know, thanks very much for that explanation at the start, and that, you know, that allays some of the fears or some of the questions I had on that basis. But on the financial aspect, to revise the rent to £1 per annum, you know, what's there now? It's saying the trust never required to pay an excess rental income to the council, and variation brings the lease payments into line with standard terms. Hopefully that will change in the future, that they will have excess money, you know, or, you know, their financial position will be stronger within that. Does this actually just take away any say in any financial inputs or anything? You know, to me it had a kind of, you know, they had to come back to us if they went and they had better financial positions and that. But does that take away any financial input from us at all?
The trust has autonomy to act on its own behalf as a registered company and a charity. Therefore, the trustees and the executives of the trust are in charge of their own finances on a daily basis, and that includes bank loans, for example. But I think the whole point of this is that the trust has never made a profit that it had to the level where it had to provide future funding for the a repayment to the council. If the trust got to that point, members would know about that because it was reported through the subcommittee in terms of financial updates and their business plan. So it doesn't preclude the members from reviewing this ultimately and changing this in the future if it's required.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair. It's just on the matter of scrutiny and at point 3 and what we're sort of posing there. If any of the functions that they look at within the subleases and assignations and such like come in conflict with the council's functions, that would obviously be of, you know, a concern to us as a council. Will we have some input into that, and will that come through the business plan? Because again, it's just this duplication and making sure that what they're doing up there isn't in conflict with what we're doing as a council or wishing to do. And would we see that through the business plan?
Absolutely, because now the council having sole control means that the business plan comes through this committee to be agreed with updates, and that's very clear in terms of performance reporting. But ultimately, the other reassurance I would give you is ultimately the council owns the Crichton Trust and can take decisions if we so wish to do so.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll go through, let's just, so we're absolutely clear, we'll go through each of them one at a time in terms of the variation. The first one, I think we were relatively content with that. It was perfectly reasonable. Tom's looking forward to still being here to amend it again in probably another 41 years' time, I think. But are we happy with the proposed variation at number 1 yet? Yeah. Okay, and the variation at number 2? Yeah. And the third one? Yeah. Okay. I'm just happy, and on the basis of no dissent, we've approved the variations to the lease as detailed in section 3.6. Ivor, sorry. Yeah.
Could we have a slight amendment there, please, to read section 3.7? Because they're detailed under 3.7 rather than 3.6.
Claire's got that. Thanks for pointing that out. We've had another meeting tomorrow. Okay. Okay, so that's recommendation 1. Are members happy to note 2.2? Yeah. Yeah, it does cover that, 3.4 to 3.2. And are members happy with 2.3? Yeah, agreed. Okay, folks, I have no further business. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance today.